Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, February 22nd, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about Kelly Loeffler, the senator appointee under Governor Brian Kemp, appointed back due to the vacancy in Georgia that came up in 2019, took office in early 2020 and ran for a special election in 2020 in November and ultimately lost in a 2021 runoff election. So pretty much she's just been a senator for around a year in total. Knew she was going to be in from 2019 but didn't actually get sworn in until around 2020. I believe she served just a little bit over a full year, meaning she was inaugurated on, I believe, January 3rd, 4th, or 5th. But pretty much it was a one-year difference between the time Kelly Loeffler took office and took over the Senate seat here and ultimately went on to lose against Raphael Warnock, the new senator from the state of Georgia, who's actually up for re-election in 2022. And based on the title of this video, you know exactly where this video is going to go, what direction it's going to move into, because you know that Kelly Loeffler is now considering a run for the 2022 Senate election in the state of Georgia. Now, the main headline here is that she is launching her own group to boost GOP turnout. What does this mean? Well, it's pretty much the exact opposite of what Stacey Abrams had to offer for the citizens in Georgia. Kelly Loeffler is trying to do something that Stacey Abrams did, a losing candidate, going on to try to run a robust voter turnout campaign. But at the end of the day, you know, Stacey Abrams was someone who was, against all odds, came within 2 points of winning a governor's race when the guy she was running against was literally the one counting the votes. And not to suggest any type of implication but also to point out that she was working against everything. Everything was working against her and the Democratic Party in Georgia. I mean, it's no secret that the South contains laws that disproportionately affect Black and brown Americans from voting. That's true. And that's exactly what Stacey Abrams targeted when she went into 2020 with the mindset, I'm not running for office, but I want this state to turn blue. And what did she do? With the help of many Black organizers, specifically Black women in the state, were crucial to the state turning blue. But what is Kelly Loeffler trying to do? Well, she's trying to counteract that. She's trying to offer the conservative view of that. But within this article, you see that there is actually a little bit that she doesn't go too vocal about, but is something that will end up on a Wikipedia article under considered because of expressed interest. And she said that she confirmed she was weighing a 2022 rematch against Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock, someone who was viewed as a sacrificial lamb against Loeffler, originally ended up winning in a runoff election by 2 percentage points. For reference, he won by a larger margin than Gary Peters in Michigan. So looking at the Loeffler defeat, well, it was not something that was nearly as close as it was on the presidential level. So let's take a look. Why would Loeffler want to run again? I mean, she could just go with this new group, but why does she want to run again? Well, I'm sure that she feels as if the Senate runoff election results in one way possibly could have been rigged. That's something that we've seen from many members of the Trump right wing. Kelly Loeffler, with a 100% Trump voting record, one of the only members of Congress with that record, ultimately lost to someone right after Donald Trump was claiming that the election would be rigged. And Kelly Loeffler won 49% of the vote. She got close, but relative to the performance for the Democrats in 2016, well, it was very lackluster for the GOP. Relative even to 2020, if you look at the shift from November, almost every single county shifted to the left, even when Donald Trump wasn't on the ballot, which means this vote wasn't necessarily just anti-Trump, but also anti-Republican Party. And looking at the states that shifted, the counties that shifted, sorry about that, there were a few exceptions that shifted to the right, but none more than 5.5%. The shifts were very minuscule, and while the Democratic Party also had minuscule shifts, it happened in every single county, with the exception of 5 or 6. So looking at the Georgia results, well, Loeffler might think 2022 might be her time to shine. If it's a red wave year, there's no reason why she wouldn't be competitive if she was at least the nominee. I think if she was the nominee, the race could be competitive, but I do think that Raphael Warnock would be the favorite to win the race. It ultimately comes down to who he would oppose, but as of right now, I will say, regardless, he seems to be the favorite to win the race as someone who was just elected in 2021. This 2021 runoff should have been the first time the Democratic Party saw blowback due to Joe Biden being elected. Balance of power and checks and balances is a system that the American people really value, which is why what you saw happen in 2010 after the Democratic Party won over 250 House seats and nearly 60 Senate seats was something to check on President Obama. Well, what you saw here happen in the Georgia Senate runoff elections, well, that's not what we saw. Because Donald Trump refused to concede the presidential election, many of his supporters assumed he was going to be in office. And because Loeffler and Perdue weren't as far right as some might see, and also weren't as center-right as some centrists and some independents who typically lean to the conservatives, specifically those suburban voters, wanted them to be, well, they couldn't find that perfect balance and ultimately ended up losing in the Georgia Senate runoff election results. But Loeffler and Perdue are both looking to run in 2022. In fact, I just made a video talking about David Perdue running. You can find that in the top right corner of the screen. Why? Well, Perdue seems as if he wants to return to Congress. He says his fight for Georgia is not over. He's filed the paperwork to do it, so he has all the means to run. Well, Loeffler has the money. While Perdue may be rich, Loeffler is exponentially rich. I mean, looking at the net worth of her and her husband, we're talking $500 million across the two. She has the money to fund a new campaign. She has the means to fundraise for a new campaign. And I do think that Raphael Warnock will still be able to hold out, but we could find a very interesting election result if she chooses to run against David Perdue. Because looking at those who have publicly expressed interest, we already have David Perdue who filed paperwork, but also Doug Collins, someone who was Trump endorsed but also ran against Kelly Loeffler back in 2020. He lost to her in the jungle primary, but it looks as if he's making a return bid, potentially for the governorship or the Senate. Either way, he's going to run, more than likely. Kelly Loeffler, now indicating she might run for Senate. It was hidden in the article, but it wasn't something that was boldly made, as bold at least of David Perdue, who made a whole statement about why he may potentially run. So Kelly Loeffler confirms she's considering it. David Perdue has already filed the paperwork, and if him filing the paperwork wasn't enough to dissuade Kelly Loeffler, well, we could be in for a very interesting primary between two Senate candidates who campaigned together not even a year before the primary season. So it was very interesting just looking at the ultimate breakdown between Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. We could ultimately end up with a Perdue-Collins-Loeffler primary that will possibly hand Raphael Warnock another Senate victory. And looking at the predictions so far, it starts off as lean Democrat from the Cook Political Report, lean Democrat from the Sabato Crystal Ball, and Battleground for Inside Elections. I expect many of these ratings to change, especially towards the Battleground type of characterization, but we still have enough to see. We still have a good amount of information to know who might run for Senate and what that means for the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party. And one thing I think that we should all be taking a look at as we look to 2022 is how the Democrats performed in 2018. 2020, the Democrats flipped Georgia, but 2018 just simply wasn't the year. And the reason why Kelly Loeffler is even confirming this is because she's launching a bid against Stacey Abrams, the Democratic nominee from Georgia in 2018. And while the Democratic Party did ultimately come up short, she still came the closest. Closest since 1966. One of the few Democrats to actually perform well here besides Biden, Ossoff, and Warnock. Prior to 2018, Democrats had not performed nearly as well as Stacey Abrams, dating all the way back to Bill Clinton and before that, Jimmy Carter. So Stacey Abrams certainly was a first. She would have been a first in the state. And instead of running in her own election in 2020, she focused her efforts on turning the state blue. And it paid off. Now she's a shoo-in for the 2022 governor election in Georgia. I think she's a shoo-in for the primary and practically a shoo-in for the general election. Brian Kemp is so unpopular that his approval ratings amongst Democrats and Republicans are almost comparable. That's insane. Because Donald Trump has vehemently attacked Brian Kemp, he has led the way for a primary challenger. But what happened in 2018 was a blue wave year, and while the Democrats came up short, it points out that the state has significantly shifted from 2018. A blue wave year versus a neutral year is what I would argue for 2020. Slight tilt, I guess, towards the Democratic Party, but by no means as much as a Democrat +8 national environment. The state itself has seen an increase in vote share, an increase in minority voters in the Atlanta metro area, an increase in suburban support. What we saw from 2018 to 2020 was a very, very robust shift. Every single county practically shifted from the left from the 2018 governor result, from the 2016 presidential election result. What do we see in 2020 essentially is that the Democratic Party performed well in Georgia enough to flip the Senate with 2 Senate seats in Georgia. Keep in mind, Democrats had not held both of these Senate seats in decades. And the Democrats did it in 2021. Now Loeffler's looking to reclaim one of these seats, but no matter what, the Democrats will have at least 1 seat in the Georgia congregation for the United States Senate. 1 Democrat till 2026. But now that both Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue are looking to run in 2022, this could be the perfect storm the Democratic Party needs to win this election handily. This is the perfect storm the Democratic Party needs. And one thing to point out is that we can look at the preliminary polling data. Once they start to take the polls as to who's doing well in the primary, Perdue versus Collins versus Loeffler, the reason why I trust Georgia polling and mainly only Georgia polling is because of its historical accuracy. In 2016, it was off by less than a percentage point. In 2020, it was off by 1 percentage point. Actually, less than that. Looking at the runoff election results, I kid you not, spot on. Warnock wins by 2 points, expected to win by 2.1%. Ossoff expected to win by 1.8, wins by 1.2. We're talking about down to the minuscule margins. Maybe off slightly, but very, very accurate. And looking at the Georgia regular election results, looking at the runoff election polls before it went, not the runoff election results, the jungle primary polls, they were very accurate. And I think that what we will start to see is more and more polls stroll out of the state of Georgia. And surprisingly enough, this is one of the few states that we can trust it. But looking at Georgia's trajectory, I find it very difficult, regardless if it's Perdue or Loeffler, mainly Loeffler, but either of them, to win in 2022. Unless it's absolutely a red wave year, one cannot deny the overwhelming trend of the state towards the left, year after year after year. In 2004, George W. Bush won the state by 16.6%. In 2008, in a landslide victory for Obama, he won 67% of the electoral vote. Georgia still went to McCain by 5.2%. In 2012, it returned to being a pretty solid state, going to Romney by 7.8%. Looking at 2016, Trump wins it by 5.1%. Then 2020, it flips. It skips over the lean Republican stage. It skips over the tilt Republican stage and goes directly into the Democratic column. If we are to compare previous elections, versus 2016, it got 5 points more Democratic. Versus 2012, 8 points. Versus 2004, 17 points. The state is on a trend to get bluer and bluer and bluer. What we are seeing is Georgia revolutionize itself. What we are seeing is Georgia, because of minority voters moving into the state and suburban voters moving away from the GOP as a response to Donald Trump and candidates like Perdue, like Loeffler, that were so close to Trump they couldn't win a runoff election, that history has told us the Democrats haven't done better in a runoff election since 1998, when there was 2% voter turnout. Looking at the results of the runoff election, what's actually very interesting is that what you look at, let's take a look. Actually, I'm going to show you the 2016 results in Georgia. I think I can find it, but we'll just go to it. The 2016 results in Georgia. What happened here? Donald Trump won 2,089,104 votes in 2016. Donald Trump in a presidential election year. In 2021, in a runoff, Raphael Warnock won 2,288,923 votes. Relative to 2016, he got nearly 200,000 votes more than Donald Trump. Nearly 200,000 votes more than a presidential election. In 2020, Donald Trump received more than that. He received 2,461,000, but the runoff was very high turnout. Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff did very well. This was more than an anti-Trump vote. This was a pro-Democratic vote. This was just an anti-Republican vote, if anything. Looking at the results for Warnock, I don't think he's someone who could be easily beaten in 2022. And if Kelly Loeffler is truly looking to make a comeback, the same way David Perdue does, and if she files her paperwork, we will be in for a very, very, very interesting primary season. On top of that, a very interesting general election season. Because realistically, I don't think David Perdue or Kelly Loeffler can win this Senate race. You don't rerun candidates. Martha McSally says hi. John James says hi. Don't do it. It rarely ever works. And if both of them want to try, they are going to divide an already divided and cracked GOP party, or the GOP, in the state of Georgia. They are going to take a crippled party that was once at its highest point in the state and reduce it into being overall just the who is more pro-Trump. And they will no longer tap into that base that the Republican Party consistently worked with, enough to win over voters in the Atlanta metro area, enough to win over counties that are now solid blue. We will not see a return of that until the Republican Party abandons Trump in the state. But the harsh reality is, for both Perdue and Loeffler and Collins and any other Republican that tries to run, you can win a general election being a moderate Republican, but you just can't win the primary. And that's the problem for all of these candidates. Because the party is fractured, it's going to be very difficult to even make it past the primary stage, much less to the general election. And now that Kelly Loeffler is looking and considering heavily running in 2022, I really do think that both Loeffler and Perdue could decisively hand this 6-year Senate seat back to Raphael Warnock. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2022 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.